ready to transfer the motor from the engine stand over to the hoist. And I will install the flywheel and the clutch. And I've already taken the clutch fork off and the throwout bearing and pulled it all off, lubed it up, cleaned it, and then reinstalled it. So this side of the transmission is ready to go. The flywheel bolts are going to get torqued to 55 pound-feet in a star type pattern. And on the other side, I'm going to hold the crank with this specialty tool, and that should allow me to crank these down. Now let's make sure the flywheel is free of all grease. There's some cleaner here. Now let's install the clutch with the alignment tool. You'll notice both sides of these clutch are not the same. The part that protrudes is going to go out towards the transmission. We'll put that in there, put that into the pilot bearing, and then that'll hold it in place as we put the pressure plate on. Before we install the pressure plate, let's make sure that all the dirt and grease is off it as well. Okay, before we install the pressure plate, let's take note of these unbalanced marks on the flywheel. There's a little white painted line here, and then the identifying mark on the pressure plate is this guy here, and they need to be at least 120-degree offset. There's also these little alignment dowels that are into the flywheel that have to mate up and go in these little holes in the sides of the pressure plate. So we'll make sure we have our 120-degree or better offset. And these bolts only get torqued to 11.8 pound-feet. Okay, these pressure plate bolts are only going to get torqued down to about 11.8 pound-feet in a crisscross direction. And also, as we tighten this down, that's what's going to clamp this clutch in between the pressure plate and the flywheel. So on the first few bolts here, I kind of want to just hold this up and make sure that it's dead center. And then once the pressure's on there, then it'll hold it in place while we torque down the rest of the bolts. All right, to get everything lined up, I'm actually gonna have to raise the car on the lift a little bit to make room for this jack, which is gonna go underneath the transmission, and then raise it up a few inches because the engine has to meet up with the transmission a little bit above here, so it leaves room for the studs to fall down into the cross member. And then before dropping the motor in, remember to place a dust shield back on the back of the motor here. All right, now with the motor back in, we just need to install the bell housing bolts and torque them to 37 pound-feet. There's two on the starter. There's one right below or behind the axle. And then there's two nuts down the bottom, one on each side. And then another one right behind the axle. And then the one right below the turbo, and then of course the one up on top. Those all get torqued down to 37 pound-feet. All right, before we install the downpipe, let's go ahead and tighten down these 3 bolts that secure the turbo to the header. And now we can go ahead and reinstall the downpipe. right, while we're under the car, don't forget to hook up your rear O2 sensor and also the upstream O2 sensor. And there's also two grounding straps, one on this heat shield to the right side of the body, and then one over here on the left side as well. Also, we got two more bolts for the downpipe that fits on the upper portion of that exhaust flange there. All right, now the car's back on the ground, you get access to the top portion of the turbo, and these bolts will go in here. And on the starter, remember to hook up your ground wire along with any of the other wires you may have taken off the starter. Now we can hook the bulkhead back on. Slides in here. There we go. And next, hook up your brake booster. And hook up your fuel lines. There's three of them here. There's one return there in the middle, and then you have a feed line on the bottom, and then one on top. Now we need to put the AC compressor back on, but in order to do that, we're going to have to pull this bracket off and then mount the AC compressor to this bracket and then remount it. All right, there's one bolt that's very difficult to get to. You can see that it's buried way back there. And so we're gonna have to pull this guy off so we can access that hole from the top. So we'll just pull that off and swing it to the side and put this in. Okay, I got this bracket off, and now I think we can get that bolt down there. I'm gonna use a magnet to get it down there. Twist it a few turns, and then I should be able to get an extension down there. All right, that worked perfect. There we go. And then we'll just bolt this back on, and we should have it. Now we can hook up the power steering pump. There's 3 bolts that hold it in, and these are the bolt hole locations. One here, and one here. So let's swing this back into place and then bolt it down. And for this bolt that's behind the pump, I'm going to use that magnet trick again. Get it in there and started. Okay, we got that in. Now we need to hook this little connector up, and then we can install the alternator. Now we can go ahead and install the AC belt. This one is damaged a bit, but the only reason I'm going to install it is that all it powers is the AC compressor. So if it fails, it's not catastrophic. It's not something that's going to leave you stranded. And it's a stretchy belt, so there is no tensioner. It will require a special tool to stretch this belt onto the pulley. All right, this is the specialty tool to install the stretch belts. This is used to both remove and install. It says remove on this side and install over here. So this is the side that we're going to put onto the pulley. It's kind of nice. It's got a little magnet there so it holds it in place, so it's not going to fall off. All right, so here we go. We got the belt onto the AC compressor fully on, and then we'll work our way on to the crank pulley. So should just turn it like so, and there you go. And then we'll just have to walk it over. Now we can install the belt that drives the alternator and the power steering pump. This is more of the conventional type, much easier to install because we have a tensioner right here. So basically just let it on there and then bring it up. There we go. Okay, once we got the tension right, then we can tighten this guy up, and then the hinge bolt. There we go, that's done. Now we can install our coolant hoses that go into the heater core. Okay, now we can go ahead and install this device. Alright, now let's hook up the electrical connectors to the alternator. Okay, now we can hook up the few remaining electrical connectors here. There's one for the AC compressor. And we have this extension that goes to this air pump. Plugs in on the bottom side here. There we go. And this gets routed over here. Okay. Put this plastic cover on. Okay. I can set the radiator back in. And then rehook a coolant hose. Let's drop our fans back in now. And then we can pop in our reservoir here. And then plug in our upper coolant reservoir hose. Now we can install our upper radiator hose. So reinstall this dust shield. We can reinstall the intercooler. Make sure that the flange here is clean and that you've installed your new O-ring or gasket there. And then remember to hook up your vacuum line to the blow-off valve. There we go. All right, now let's put the car back in the air and we'll hook up our lower radiator hose and electrical fans. Okay, now we can hook up our lower coolant hose. Okay, and then our fans. One on each side. All right, the only thing left to do underneath the car is install the oil filter and get some oil. So I guess I'm gonna run to the store now and get that stuff. All right, the only thing left to do under this hood is to install the air intake, the battery, and the oil fill tube. All right, I just went ahead and added the oil. But before the first start, what we want to do is pull the fuel pump fuse, which is this 15 amp one right here. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll turn the engine over a few times. I don't want it to start. And then I'll wait for the oil light to go off, which means it will have oil pressure. And then at that point, I'll go ahead and plug the fuse back in, and then hopefully it'll start up. All right, here we go. Fuel pump fuse is pulled, so it will not start. So we're just waiting to see when the oil light goes off. After a few more attempts, the oil light went off, so I just went ahead and replaced the fuel pump fuse. So let's just turn this to the run position a couple times. I can hear the fuel pump running, so let's just do that to get some fuel into the system. Okay, let's hope she starts. Perfect. All right, car fired up perfectly. So now I just kind of want to look underneath, make sure nothing's leaking anywhere. Around the oil pump, looks dry. Oil pan looks dry. Of course, we know we had the leaky axle seal. Nothing on the ground. So it looks like a success. So next step is to add coolant, and hopefully we won't have any leaks with the coolant. All right, before adding coolant, I want to put a vacuum on the coolant system and make sure it holds. That ensures that I don't have a leak, and we'll have to waste a bunch of coolant trying to shoot down a leak. So anyway, I created a little bit of a vacuum there, so we'll just let it sit here and observe the needle. So far it looks pretty good. If there's a leak, it's nothing too significant. It's about 20 minutes later, and it looks like we still have vacuum, and it looks like the hose are still collapsed. So I think we're good. So let's go ahead and add the coolant. Just finishing up adding coolant to the system. Everything looks like it's working fine. We got heat in the cabin now. Upper radiator hose is now hot, so it looks like that coolant circulating through the whole entire system. No more bubbles coming out. I think we can call this a wrap. I ran it a little bit longer and waited for the coolant fans to come on, and they did. So everything looks like it's operating properly. Looked under the car, there's no leaks. So once this cools down, I'll take the funnel off and recap it and then test it under full pressure. And then check again for leaks, then probably take it for a test drive, but I really don't anticipate any problems. So I think we're gonna call this one a success. I'm not sure what the next project will be, but I'll see you then. Bye-bye.